The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but Tyler was already awake. He'd been staring at the ceiling for the past hour, counting the water stains and wondering how he was going to make it through another 18-hour day. His small apartment felt more like a prison cell than a home, with its peeling wallpaper and the constant drip from the kitchen faucet that he couldn't afford to fix. Tyler rolled out of bed and stumbled to the tiny bathroom, splashing cold water on his face. The mirror showed a young man who looked older than his 23 years. Dark circles under his eyes told the story of too many late nights studying and too many early mornings at work. But his grandmother always said that hard work builds character, and Tyler was determined to prove her right. After a quick shower and a breakfast of instant oatmeal, Tyler grabbed his Save Mart uniform from the closet. The green polo shirt was starting to fade from too many washes, and there was a small tear near the pocket that he'd been meaning to fix for weeks. But it was clean, and that's what mattered. He tucked his business textbooks into his backpack, knowing he'd steal moments to study during his break. The bus ride to work took 45 minutes, winding through neighborhoods that seemed to get nicer the farther he traveled from his apartment. Tyler used this time to review his notes from last night's economics class. College wasn't easy when you were working full-time, but he'd made a promise to himself and his grandmother that he would finish his degree. She'd worked 3 jobs to raise him after his parents died in a car accident when he was 7, and now it was his turn to take care of her. The grocery store was already buzzing with activity when Tyler arrived at 7 a.m. The morning shift was his favorite, because the customers were usually in a hurry and didn't have time for long conversations. It gave him more opportunities to think about his studies or plan for the future. He clocked in and headed to Register 3, his usual spot. "Morning, Tyler," called out Mrs. Garcia, the store manager. She was a kind woman in her 50s who'd given Tyler a chance when other employers had passed him by. "How's your grandmother doing?" "Better today, thank you for asking," Tyler replied, though they both knew it wasn't entirely true. His grandmother's diabetes was getting worse, and the medical bills were piling up faster than Tyler could pay them. The insurance barely covered anything, and the medications alone cost more than Tyler made in a week. As the morning rush began, Tyler fell into his familiar rhythm. Scan, bag, smile, repeat. He genuinely enjoyed helping people, even when they were grumpy or impatient. His grandmother had taught him that everyone was fighting battles you couldn't see, so kindness was always the right choice. Around 10 a.m., a regular customer approached his line. Mrs. Thompson was an elderly woman who lived alone and came in every few days for small groceries. She always paid with exact change and never bought anything expensive. Today, she was counting coins at the register, trying to pay for a small container of soup and a package of crackers. "I'm sorry, dear," she said, her hands shaking slightly as she counted. "I think I'm $1 short." Without hesitation, Tyler reached into his own pocket and pulled out a crumpled dollar bill. "Don't worry about it, Mrs. Thompson. Have a good day." She looked up at him with grateful eyes. "You're too kind, son. I'll pay you back next time." Tyler knew she wouldn't remember, and he was okay with that. It wasn't the first time he'd helped a customer who was short on money, and it wouldn't be the last. These small gestures felt right, even when his own bank account was practically empty. The lunch rush brought a different energy to the store. Families with young children, office workers grabbing quick meals, and teenagers spending their allowances on snacks and energy drinks. Tyler handled each transaction with the same level of care and attention, making small talk when appropriate and working efficiently when customers were clearly in a hurry. During his 30-minute break, Tyler sat in the employee room with his economics textbook open on the table. He was studying supply and demand curves while eating a peanut butter sandwich he'd packed from home. The break room was small and windowless, but it was quiet, and Tyler had learned to make the most of every free moment. "Still hitting the books?" asked Danny, another cashier who was a few years older than Tyler. "Man, I don't know how you do it. Work all day and study all night." Tyler shrugged. "Just trying to build something better, you know? My grandmother always said education is the one thing nobody can take away from you." Danny nodded, though Tyler could tell he didn't really understand. Most of his coworkers were nice enough, but they didn't share his drive to change his circumstances. They seemed content with the routine, but Tyler saw this job as a stepping stone, not a destination. The afternoon shift brought its own challenges. The store got busier as people stopped by after work and the lines grew longer. Tyler's feet ached in his worn sneakers and his back was starting to hurt from standing for so many hours. But he kept his smile genuine and his service fast. Around 4 p.m., a mother with 3 young children came through his line with a cart full of groceries. The kids were tired and cranky, and one of them knocked over a display of candy bars while the mother was trying to corral the others. Tyler quickly stepped out from behind his register to help clean up the mess. "I'm so sorry," the mother said, looking embarrassed and overwhelmed. "No problem at all," Tyler replied, gathering the scattered candy. "Happens all the time. You've got your hands full." He helped her load the groceries into bags, making sure to put the heavy items in the bottom and the fragile ones on top. When her card was declined, Tyler discreetly asked Mrs. Garcia if they could approve it anyway, knowing the family probably needed those groceries. Mrs. Garcia agreed, and the mother left with tears of gratitude in her eyes. As his shift wound down, Tyler reflected on the day. It hadn't been anything special by most people's standards. No major events, no life-changing moments. Just another day of serving customers and trying to make their experiences a little bit better. But Tyler found satisfaction in these small interactions, in the knowledge that he was making a difference, even if it was just one smile or one helpful gesture at a time. The bus ride home was quiet, giving Tyler time to think about his future. He had a test coming up in his marketing class and he needed to finish reading a chapter about consumer behavior. He also needed to call the doctor's office about his grandmother's next appointment and figure out how to pay for her new medication. But despite all the challenges, Tyler felt hopeful. He was building something, slowly but surely. Every hour worked was an hour closer to his degree. Every customer helped was a chance to practice the leadership skills he'd need in his future career. Every small kindness was an investment in the type of person he wanted to become. He didn't know it yet, but tomorrow would bring an encounter that would change everything. For now, though, Tyler was content to take life one day at a time, one customer at a time, one dream at a time. Thursday evening arrived with the usual rush of people stopping by after work. Tyler had been on his feet for nearly 10 hours, but he still greeted each customer with the same warm smile he'd started the day with. His grandmother always said that treating people right didn't cost anything, but it was worth everything. The store was particularly busy tonight. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, mixing with the sounds of shopping carts rolling across the worn linoleum floors and the constant beeping of barcode scanners. Tyler's register was one of 5 that were open, but somehow his line always seemed to move the fastest. Customers often switched to his lane because they knew he'd get them through quickly without making them feel rushed. Around 7:30, Tyler noticed an elderly man shuffling toward his line. The man looked to be in his 70s with gray hair that needed a trim and clothes that had seen better days. His jacket was clean but faded and his shoes were scuffed and worn thin at the heels. He moved slowly, using a worn wooden cane that clicked softly against the floor with each step. What struck Tyler most was how the man carried himself. Despite his shabby appearance, there was something dignified about the way he walked. His back was straight and his eyes were alert and kind. He reminded Tyler of his own grandfather, who had passed away when Tyler was in high school. The man joined Tyler's line behind a woman with 2 young boys who were arguing over which cereal they wanted. Tyler handled their transaction with his usual patience, even when one of the boys accidentally knocked over a small display of gum. After they left, the elderly man stepped forward and placed his items on the conveyor belt. Tyler looked at the small purchase and felt his heart sink a little. There was just a loaf of white bread and a small jar of store-brand peanut butter, the kind of meal Tyler himself had eaten many times when money was tight. The man's hands shook slightly as he reached for his wallet, and Tyler noticed how thin he looked. "Good evening, sir," Tyler said with genuine warmth. "How are you doing tonight?" "Oh, I'm doing fine, young man," the elderly man replied, his voice soft but clear. "Just picking up a few things for dinner. My name's Frank, by the way." "Nice to meet you, Frank. I'm Tyler." Frank smiled, and Tyler noticed how it lit up his whole face. Tyler's a good name. Strong name. As Tyler scanned the items, Frank pulled out a small, worn wallet that looked like it had been with him for decades. The leather was cracked and soft from years of use. Frank opened it and pulled out a debit card that was so worn the numbers were barely visible. "Let me just," Frank said, inserting the card into the reader. They waited for a moment, but the machine beeped with an error message. "Declined." Frank looked confused and a little embarrassed. That's strange. Let me try again. Tyler watched as Frank tried the card 2 more times, each attempt ending with the same result. The line behind them was starting to grow, and Tyler could sense people getting impatient. A woman behind Frank sighed loudly and checked her phone, while a man in a business suit tapped his foot. "I'm so sorry," Frank said, his face reddening. "I don't understand. There should be money in there." Tyler's heart went out to the older man. He'd seen this happen before, usually with elderly customers who sometimes got confused about their bank balances or had cards that malfunctioned. It was always heartbreaking to watch. "No worries at all, Frank," Tyler said gently. "These machines act up sometimes. Do you maybe have cash?" Frank nodded and put his card away, then began pulling out crumpled dollar bills from different pockets. Tyler watched as Frank carefully counted each bill, his hands trembling slightly. $1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then Frank started digging for change, pulling out quarters and dimes from a small coin purse. The total came to $5.78, but as Frank counted his money, Tyler could see the growing worry on the man's face. Frank had $5.31. He was short by 47 cents, but those 47 cents might as well have been $47 for all the difference it made. I think I'm a little short," Frank said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Let me put something back." He reached for the peanut butter, clearly intending to leave it behind. Tyler's chest tightened as he watched this proud man trying to decide between bread and protein for his dinner. Behind them, the woman sighed again, louder this time. "Come on," she muttered. "Some of us have places to be." Frank heard her and his shoulders sagged slightly. "I'm so sorry, everyone. I'll put these back and get out of your way." That's when something inside Tyler shifted. He thought about his grandmother, who had gone without meals to make sure Tyler had food growing up. He thought about all the times strangers had shown him kindness when he needed it most. He thought about the right thing to do, even when money was tight. Without hesitation, Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. It was part of the money he'd set aside for bus fare home, but he could walk if he needed to. It wouldn't be the first time. "You know what, Frank?" Tyler said, keeping his voice casual and warm. "Tonight's your lucky night. The store is running a special promotion for senior customers. This one's on the house." Frank looked up at Tyler with surprise. "Oh no, son, I couldn't let you do that." "It's not me," Tyler said with a wink, sliding his own money into the register. "It's the store promotion. Happens every Thursday evening. You just happen to be customer number 100 tonight." Tyler knew Frank probably didn't believe him, but the older man's dignity was more important than the truth. Frank's eyes filled with tears that he quickly blinked away. That's very kind," Frank said softly. "Very kind indeed." Tyler bagged the items carefully, making sure to double bag them so they wouldn't tear. He handed the bag to Frank with a genuine smile. "You have a wonderful evening, Frank. And hey, make sure you come back and see us again soon." Frank took the bag and looked at Tyler for a long moment. There was something in his eyes that Tyler couldn't quite read. Gratitude certainly, but something else too. Something that looked almost like recognition? But that didn't make sense. "Thank you, Tyler," Frank said, his voice thick with emotion. "You're a good young man. Your parents raised you right." "My grandmother did," Tyler replied. "She always taught me to look out for people." Frank nodded slowly. "Smart woman. You listened to her." As Frank walked away, Tyler watched him go. The older man moved a little differently now, with less weight on his shoulders. Tyler felt good about what he'd done, even though he now had to figure out how to get home without bus fare. The impatient woman stepped up next, her expression softer now. "That was really nice of you," she said quietly. Tyler just smiled and started scanning her items. "Just another Thursday at Save Mart," he said. But somehow Tyler had the feeling this Thursday was different. He couldn't shake the image of Frank's face or the way the man had looked at him with those sharp, intelligent eyes. There had been something about that encounter that felt important, though Tyler couldn't put his finger on what it was. As the evening wore on and Tyler helped customer after customer, he found himself thinking about Frank. He wondered if the man had made it home safely, if he was enjoying his simple dinner, if he had family who cared about him. Tyler hoped that wherever Frank was, he felt a little less alone tonight. Little did Tyler know that Frank was thinking about him too, and that this chance encounter would change both their lives forever. Frank walked slowly to his car in the Save Mart parking lot, his mind racing despite his careful, measured steps. The brown paper bag in his hand felt heavier than it should have, not because of the bread and peanut butter inside, but because of what had just happened at Register 3. He sat in his modest rental car for several minutes, staring back at the store through the large windows. He could see Tyler still working, helping customers with the same genuine smile he'd shown everyone that evening. Frank had expected many things when he'd started these undercover visits to his stores, but he certainly hadn't expected this. Franklin Pierce had built Pierce Industries from a small family grocery store into one of the largest retail chains in the country. He owned over 300 stores across 15 states, including this Save Mart location. At 74 years old, he'd seen just about everything the business world had to offer. But tonight, a young cashier had reminded him of something he'd almost forgotten. The whole undercover operation had started 3 months ago, when customer satisfaction scores began dropping across several locations. Corporate headquarters had been receiving complaints about rude employees, long wait times, and poor service. The board of directors was breathing down Frank's neck, demanding answers and solutions. Frank had always believed in leading from the front. Back when he had just 5 stores, he used to visit each location regularly, talking to employees and customers alike. But as the company grew, he'd become more removed from the day-to-day operations. He spent his time in boardrooms and conference calls, making decisions based on reports and spreadsheets rather than real human interactions. The idea to go undercover had come to him during a particularly frustrating board meeting. Instead of sending corporate inspectors or hiring mystery shopping companies, Frank decided to see things for himself. He traded his expensive suits for thrift store clothes, left his luxury car at home, and started visiting stores as just another customer. The past 3 months had been eye-opening, and not in a good way. He'd witnessed employees who seemed to hate their jobs, managers who treated customers like nuisances, and a general atmosphere of indifference in too many locations. Some stores felt cold and unwelcoming, more like warehouses than places where families came to buy food and household necessities. Frank had almost given up hope that the company culture could be salvaged. He'd been seriously considering selling the chain and retiring. The magic that had built Pierce Industries seemed to have died somewhere along the way, replaced by corporate efficiency and profit margins. But tonight had been different. Tonight he'd met Tyler. Frank pulled out his phone and called his assistant, Helen, who'd been with the company for over 20 years. She was one of the few people who knew about his undercover visits. "Helen, it's Frank. I need you to do something for me." "Of course, Mr. Pierce." "How did tonight's visit go?" Frank looked back at the store, where Tyler was still working under the bright fluorescent lights. "Different than expected. I need you to pull the employee records for the Save Mart location on Maple Street. Specifically, I want everything we have on a cashier named Tyler." "Tyler what? Do you have a last name?" "Not yet, but he works Register 3 on the evening shift. Young man, probably early 20s, African-American. I need his full employment history, performance reviews, everything." "Right away, sir. Should I be concerned? Did something happen?" Frank thought about how to answer that question. Something had definitely happened, but it wasn't what Helen was probably thinking. "No, nothing like that. This employee showed exceptional character tonight. I want to know more about him." After hanging up, Frank drove to a nearby coffee shop and ordered a simple black coffee. He found a quiet corner table and pulled out a small notebook he'd been using to document his store visits. Usually his notes were filled with complaints and areas for improvement. Tonight he wrote something completely different. Tyler, Register 3, Maple Street location, approximately 22-24 years old, treated every customer with genuine respect and kindness, efficient but never rushed. When an elderly customer couldn't afford his groceries, Tyler paid the difference from his own pocket without hesitation. Made up a story about a store promotion to preserve the customer's dignity. "This is the kind of employee we used to have. This is the kind of person we need more of." Frank's phone buzzed with a text from Helen. "Found him. Tyler Washington, hired 8 months ago. Excellent performance reviews. Available to talk whenever you're ready." 20 minutes later, Frank was on a conference call with Helen and David Morrison, the regional manager who oversaw the Maple Street location. "David," Frank said, "tell me about Tyler Washington." "Tyler? He's one of our best employees." "Why do you ask?" "Just answer the question, please." David's voice came through clearly. "Well, he's incredibly reliable. Never misses a shift, always on time. Customers love him. His transaction times are among the fastest in the district, but he never makes people feel rushed. Mrs. Garcia, the store manager, constantly praises his work. What about his background? He's a college student studying business, works almost full-time while going to school. I believe he's supporting his grandmother who has some health issues. He applied for a team leader position a few months ago. Frank leaned forward. What happened with that application? There was a pause. Well, honestly, he was the most qualified candidate, but corporate had put a freeze on promotions due to budget concerns. We had to give the position to someone with more seniority, even though Tyler was clearly better suited for it. Frank felt a knot form in his stomach. So we passed over our best employee because of a budget freeze. I'm sorry, sir, but I wasn't aware you were involved in staffing decisions at that level. Frank realized he'd revealed too much. I'm not. I'm just conducting some research on employee satisfaction. What else can you tell me about Tyler? He's the kind of employee every manager dreams of having. He handles difficult customers with patience, helps his coworkers without being asked, and maintains a positive attitude even during busy periods. If I could clone him, I would. After the call ended, Frank sat in his car in the coffee shop parking lot, thinking about everything he'd learned. Here was a young man working himself to exhaustion, supporting a sick relative, pursuing an education, and still finding the energy to show kindness to strangers. And how had Pierce Industries rewarded this dedication? By denying him a promotion he'd earned. Frank thought about his own grandson, who was about Tyler's age. The boy had never worked a day in his life, had been handed every opportunity on a silver platter, and still complained constantly about how unfair the world was. The contrast was stark and uncomfortable. He pulled up Tyler's employee file on his phone. The photo showed a young man with bright eyes and a genuine smile. His performance metrics were impressive. His attendance record was perfect, and every customer comment mentioned his helpfulness and positive attitude. Frank made a decision that would change everything. He called Helen back. Helen, I need you to clear my schedule for tomorrow. I'm going back to the Maple Street store. Another undercover visit? No, Frank said, looking back toward the Save Mart location where Tyler was probably still working. This time I'm going as myself. There's someone I need to meet properly. As Frank drove home to his large empty house in the suburbs, he couldn't stop thinking about Tyler's words. My grandmother always taught me to look out for people. It was such a simple philosophy, but it was exactly what Pierce Industries had lost somewhere along the way. Frank had spent decades building a business empire, accumulating wealth and power. But tonight, a young cashier had shown him something more valuable than any financial success. Tyler had shown him what it meant to have character, to do the right thing even when no one was watching, even when it cost you something you couldn't afford to lose. Tomorrow, Frank would begin to repay that lesson. But more importantly, he would start rebuilding his company's soul, one employee and one customer at a time, just like Tyler had shown him. The next morning, Frank arrived at the Save Mart location dressed in a simple gray suit and carrying a clipboard. To anyone watching, he looked like just another corporate inspector making routine rounds. He'd done this kind of visit thousands of times over the years, but today felt different. Today, he had a specific mission. Mrs. Garcia was restocking shelves near the front of the store when Frank approached her. She was a woman in her early 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of years of hard work. Frank had read her file the night before and knew she'd been with the company for 12 years, working her way up from cashier to store manager. "Excuse me, are you the store manager?" Frank asked, keeping his voice neutral and professional. Mrs. Garcia looked up and straightened her shoulders. "Yes, I'm Rosa Garcia. How can I help you?" Frank showed her an official-looking badge that identified him as a corporate quality assurance inspector. It wasn't technically a lie since he did own the company, but it wasn't the whole truth either. "I'm conducting employee evaluations for corporate headquarters. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your staff, particularly your evening shift cashiers." Mrs. Garcia nodded, though Frank could see a hint of nervousness in her eyes. Most store managers got anxious when corporate showed up unannounced. "Of course. Would you like to talk in my office? Actually, I'd prefer to walk around the store while we talk. I like to see operations in action." As they walked through the aisles, Frank asked general questions about store operations, customer satisfaction, and employee performance. Mrs. Garcia answered professionally. clearly trying to present her store in the best possible light. Frank could tell she genuinely cared about her employees and her customers. "I'm particularly interested in your cashier performance," Frank said as they approached the checkout area. "Customer service scores have been a focus for corporate lately." "Our cashiers are excellent," Mrs. Garcia said with genuine pride. "We have a really good team here. Anyone in particular stand out?" Mrs. Garcia's face lit up immediately. "Oh, absolutely. Tyler Washington. He works evenings and weekends. That young man is something special." Frank felt his pulse quicken but kept his expression neutral. "Tell me more about him." "Where do I even start?" Mrs. Garcia said, pausing to help a customer who couldn't find the pasta sauce. After pointing them in the right direction, she continued walking with Frank. "Tyler started here about 8 months ago. He was looking for part-time work to help pay for college, but he ended up taking on almost full-time hours. Never complains, never calls in sick, always willing to stay late if we need him." They stopped near Register 3 where Tyler usually worked. Frank looked at the station and remembered the previous evening's encounter. "What makes him special?" Frank asked. Mrs. Garcia leaned against a nearby display and smiled. "It's not just one thing. It's everything. The way he treats customers, the way he helps his coworkers, his attitude. You know how some employees just go through the motions? Tyler actually cares. Can you give me an example? Last month we had this elderly customer who came in every week. Sweet lady. But she was starting to show signs of memory problems. She'd forget things, get confused about prices, sometimes couldn't remember where she parked her car. Other employees started getting impatient with her. But not Tyler. He'd walk her to her car after his shift, help her load groceries, make sure she got home safely. Frank felt something tighten in his chest. Did corporate know about this?
Why would they?
Tyler did it on his own time. He never clocked out late or asked for overtime pay for helping her. That's just who he is. As they continued walking, Mrs. Garcia shared more stories. Tyler staying after his shift to help train new employees. Tyler organizing a collection among the staff when a coworker's house was damaged in a storm. Tyler working a double shift on his birthday because someone called in sick. "What about his education?" Frank asked. "You mentioned he's in college." Mrs. Garcia's expression became more serious. "Business degree. He wants to be an entrepreneur someday, maybe run his own company. He studies during his breaks, even takes notes on his phone between customers sometimes. I've never seen someone so determined to better themselves. And his family situation? He's taking care of his grandmother. She raised him after his parents died in an accident when he was young. She's got diabetes now and the medical bills are tough. That's part of why he works so many hours." Frank thought about his own grandson, who complained about having to take summer internships at companies his father arranged for him. The contrast was painful. "Has Tyler applied for any promotions or advancement opportunities?" Mrs. Garcia's face fell slightly. "He applied for a team leader position about 3 months ago. Honestly, he was the best candidate by far, better than some of the current team leaders we have. But corporate had implemented a hiring freeze and we had to promote based on seniority instead." "How did he take that news?" "Like a professional. He congratulated the person who got the job and asked what he could do to be ready for the next opportunity. No complaints, no attitude, just kept working hard." Frank made notes on his clipboard, though he was really just trying to process everything he was hearing. This young man had been passed over for a promotion he deserved because of policies Frank himself had approved to cut costs. "What do customers say about him?" "See for yourself," Mrs. Garcia said, pulling out a folder from behind the customer service counter. "These are comment cards from the past few months." Frank flipped through the cards, reading comment after comment, praising Tyler by name. "The young man at Register 3 was so helpful and kind. Tyler made my day with his positive attitude. That cashier Tyler went above and beyond to help me find what I needed." One comment card stood out. It was from an elderly woman named Betty Thompson. "Tyler is an angel. When I was short on money for my groceries last week, he took care of it without making me feel embarrassed. People like him are rare these days." Frank recognized the name and situation from his own experience the night before. This wasn't an isolated incident. Tyler regularly helped customers who were struggling, often using his own money. "Mrs. Garcia," Frank said carefully, "in your professional opinion, what kind of potential does Tyler have?" She didn't hesitate. "Management potential, absolutely. Maybe even higher than that. He has natural leadership skills. He understands customer service at a deep level, And he has the work ethic to succeed at anything he puts his mind to. If I were running a larger operation, I'd want 10 employees like Tyler. What's holding him back? Honestly, opportunity. He's doing everything right. But he's stuck in an entry-level position because corporate policies don't always reward merit. It's frustrating to watch such talent go unrecognized. Frank spent another hour walking through the store, observing operations and asking more questions, but his mind kept returning to Tyler. Here was exactly the kind of employee Pierce Industries needed more of, and they were wasting his potential because of bureaucratic policies and budget constraints. As Frank prepared to leave, Mrs. Garcia walked him to the door. "Can I ask what this evaluation is for?" she said. "Is Tyler in some kind of trouble?" Frank looked back at the store, thinking about the young man who would arrive for his shift in a few hours, probably carrying textbooks and ready to work hard for another day. "No trouble at all," Frank said. "Quite the opposite, actually. Tyler Washington might be exactly what this company needs." As Frank drove back to corporate headquarters, he made several phone calls. By the time he reached his office, he had set in motion a series of events that would change not just Tyler's life, but the entire direction of Pierce Industries. Sometimes the best business decisions came from the heart, and Frank's heart was telling him that Tyler Washington represented everything his company had lost and needed to find again. 1 week later, Tyler was having what felt like the longest shift of his life. It was Thursday evening again, exactly 7 days since his encounter with Frank, and everything seemed normal on the surface. But something felt different in the air. Mrs. Garcia had been acting strange all day, checking her phone constantly and looking toward the front entrance every few minutes. Tyler was restocking bags at Register 3 when he noticed a small crowd gathering near the store's main entrance. Through the large windows, he could see several expensive-looking cars pulling into the parking lot. Black sedans and SUVs that definitely didn't belong to their usual customers. "Tyler!" Mrs. Garcia called out, her voice tight with nervous energy. "Could you come here for a moment?" Tyler looked around the store and noticed that all the other employees were watching him. Danny from Register 2 gave him a worried look, while Linda from customer service was whispering to another coworker. Tyler's stomach dropped. Had he done something wrong? Was he about to be fired? As Tyler walked toward Mrs. Garcia, the automatic doors slid open and a group of well-dressed people entered the store. There were about 6 of them, all wearing expensive suits and carrying themselves with the confidence that came with corporate authority. Tyler had never seen any of them before, but their presence immediately changed the atmosphere in the store. At the front of the group was an elderly man in a perfectly tailored navy blue suit. He was tall and distinguished, with silver hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Tyler thought he looked familiar but couldn't place where he might have seen him before. Then the man turned and looked directly at Tyler, and suddenly Tyler's world tilted sideways. Those were the same kind eyes he'd looked into a week ago, the same gentle expression. But instead of worn clothes and a wooden cane, this man commanded the room with a presence that spoke of power and influence. "Tyler," Mrs. Garcia said quietly, "I'd like you to meet Mr. Franklin Pierce." The name hit Tyler like a physical blow. Franklin Pierce. The Franklin Pierce. The founder and CEO of Pierce Industries, the company that owned Save Mart and hundreds of other stores across the country. Tyler had read about him in his business textbooks, studied his company's growth, strategies in class, and he was Frank, the elderly man who couldn't afford bread and peanut butter, was one of the richest and most powerful businessmen in the country. Tyler's mouth went dry as Frank stepped forward, extending his hand with a warm smile. "Hello again, Tyler. Though I suppose I should properly introduce myself this time. I'm Franklin Pierce, and I owe you a very important conversation." Tyler shook his hand automatically, his mind struggling to process what was happening. You're Frank from last week." "I am indeed. And you, young man, taught me something very important that night." By now, other customers in the store had stopped shopping to watch the scene unfolding. Mrs. Garcia looked like she might faint from the stress, while the other employees stood frozen in place. "I don't understand," Tyler said, his voice barely above a whisper. Frank gestured toward the employee break room. "Would you mind if we talked privately? I have some things I'd like to share with you." Tyler nodded numbly and followed Frank and the corporate executives toward the back of the store. As they walked, Tyler caught snippets of whispered conversations from customers and co-workers. Word was already spreading that something extraordinary was happening. In the small break room, Frank gestured for Tyler to sit down while the other executives remained standing along the walls. Tyler felt like he was in some kind of dream or maybe a nightmare. "Tyler," Frank began, sitting across from him at the small table where Tyler usually ate his lunch and studied. "Last Thursday night I came to this store as part of an investigation. Our customer satisfaction scores have been declining, and I wanted to see for myself what was happening in our locations." Tyler listened, still trying to wrap his head around the situation. "I expected to find indifferent employees and poor service. Instead, I met a young man who showed me something I'd forgotten existed in business: genuine care for other people." Frank leaned forward, his expression serious but kind. "When you paid for my groceries with your own money I'm sure you couldn't afford to spare, you reminded me why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't just to make money. It was to serve people, to be part of communities, to make life a little better for everyone who walked through our doors." Tyler found his voice. It seemed like the right thing to do." "Exactly," Frank said, smiling. "And that's what makes it so remarkable. You didn't think about it. You didn't weigh the costs and benefits. You saw someone who needed help and you helped. That's the kind of character that can't be taught in business school." One of the executives stepped forward and handed Frank a folder. Tyler's hands were shaking as he tried to process what was happening. "Tyler, I've spent the past week learning everything I can about you. Your work ethic, your academic achievements, your dedication to your family. Your manager thinks you're the best employee she's ever had. Your customers consistently praise you by name. Your professors describe you as one of their most dedicated students." Tyler felt tears threatening to form in his eyes. "Sir, I really don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything yet. Just listen." Frank opened the folder and pulled out several documents. "I'm here today to offer you something, Tyler. Actually, several things." Frank's voice grew stronger, more formal, as if he were making a business presentation. "First, Pierce Industries would like to offer you a full scholarship to complete your business degree. All tuition, books, and fees covered." Tyler's jaw dropped. The room seemed to spin around him. "Second, we're offering you a management position at our corporate headquarters. You'll start as an assistant manager in our customer experience division, with a salary of $65,000 per year, full benefits, and clear opportunities for advancement." Tyler couldn't speak. The numbers Frank was mentioning were more money than Tyler had ever imagined making, certainly more than he'd ever thought possible at his age. "Third," Frank continued, "the company will cover all of your grandmother's medical expenses. Her treatments, medications, doctor visits, everything." That's when Tyler broke down. He put his face in his hands as the weight of what Frank was offering hit him. His grandmother could get the care she needed. He could finish school without drowning in debt. He could build the career he'd dreamed of. "Why?" Tyler asked through his tears. "Why are you doing this?" Frank reached across the table and put his hand on Tyler's shoulder. "Because you reminded me that business isn't just about profit margins and quarterly reports. It's about people. And you, Tyler, represent the best of what people can be." Frank stood up and addressed everyone in the room. "But this isn't just about Tyler. What I witnessed here has convinced me that we need to change how Pierce Industries operates. We're implementing new policies to recognize and reward employees who show exceptional character and customer service. We're increasing wages across all our stores. We're creating advancement programs for people like Tyler who have the drive to succeed." Tyler looked up at Frank, still trying to believe this was really happening. "You changed my life that night, Tyler," Frank said. "You reminded me that the greatest businesses are built on simple human kindness. Now I want to give you the chance to help me rebuild this company with those values at its heart." Tyler stood up and shook Frank's hand again, this time with a firm grip and a genuine smile. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Frank replied. "Because if there's one thing I've learned, it's that character like yours doesn't change. It just gets the opportunity to shine brighter." As they walked back into the store, Tyler saw all his co-workers and customers watching with anticipation. Mrs. Garcia had tears in her eyes, and even tough guy Danny was smiling. Tyler Washington had started that day as a cashier studying business textbooks during his breaks. He was ending it as the future of one of America's largest retail companies. Sometimes kindness really does change everything.